The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated at the center of the galaxy like a metal moon, and inside its walls, the fate of countless worlds had been decided over 3,000 years. Today would be no different, or so the Council believed. Ambassador Xyleth Voronek of the Hegemony Collective walked into the chamber with his head held high. His green scales shimmered under the artificial lights, and his 4 eyes scanned the room with obvious pride. He had served the Council for 200 years, and he had seen dozens of young species brought to heel. The process was always the same. The Council would make demands. The young species would protest, and then they would submit. It was the natural order of things. High Arbiter Thesha called the assembly to order. She was an ancient being made of pure crystalline light, and when she spoke, her voice echoed through the minds of every creature present. 47 species had sent their representatives today, and they all turned their attention to the massive holographic display that flickered to life in the center of the chamber. A small blue planet appeared on the screen. It was a pretty world with white clouds and deep oceans, but it was unremarkable by galactic standards. This was Earth, the homeworld of the species known as humans. The Council has completed its evaluation of the species designated human, Thesha announced. They have been spacefaring for approximately 200 of their years. They have established 17 colony worlds and constructed a modest defensive fleet. Their technology is adequate but unremarkable. Their military capacity poses no significant threat to any Council member. Xyleth clicked his mandibles in amusement. He had read the intelligence reports on humanity, and he was not impressed. These humans were soft creatures with only 2 eyes and no natural armor. They could not breathe underwater or survive in vacuum. They needed to sleep for 1/3 of every day. How had such weak beings even reached the stars? Councillor Preth of the Mandari leaned forward with interest. His people had been a tribute species for 3 centuries, and he always felt a mix of pity and dark satisfaction when new victims were brought before the Council. What resources do they possess? He asked. Their worlds are rich in heavy metals and rare minerals, Thesha replied. Their agricultural output is substantial, and their population numbers approximately 50 billion across all colonies. They would make excellent workers. Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. New tribute species meant new resources flowing into Council coffers. It meant new laborers for dangerous mining operations and new servants for wealthy households. The system had worked perfectly for 3,000 years. Therefore, Thesha continued, the Council hereby decrees that humanity shall render the following tribute: 60% of their annual mineral production, 40% of their agricultural yield, and 10,000 individuals per cycle to serve in labor roles across Council worlds. Xyleth smiled, which was a frightening expression on his reptilian face. The demands were harsh but standard. Young species always received the heaviest burden because they were too weak to resist. Over time, if they proved loyal and useful, their tribute might be reduced. Or it might not. The Council was not known for its mercy. A diplomatic vessel will be dispatched to Sol System immediately, Thesha declared. The humans will have 30 rotations to accept these terms and begin tribute payments. Failure to comply will result in military intervention. The representatives began to disperse, already discussing how they would divide the new resources among themselves. Xyleth lingered for a moment, studying the image of Earth that still floated in the air. Such a small world, such a young species. They had no idea what was coming for them. He thought about all the other species that had stood where humanity now stood. The Valari had been a proud people once, with great cities and beautiful art. Now they numbered less than 1 million and served as domestic workers for wealthy council families. The Crothians had been fierce warriors who had actually tried to fight back. Their resistance had lasted exactly 12 days before their fleet was reduced to dust and their leaders were executed. Now they worked in the mines, their culture and history slowly being erased. The Mindari had been clever. They had negotiated and bargained and tried to find loopholes in the tribute system. But in the end, they had submitted like all the others. Councillor Preth sat in this chamber now, but everyone knew he was here only because the council allowed it. His vote meant nothing. His voice carried no weight. He was a pet, kept around to show other species what good behavior looked like. Xylith wondered which path the humans would choose. Would they weep and beg like the Volari? Would they fight and die like the Crothians? Would they try to negotiate like the Mindari? It did not matter. All roads led to the same destination. Submission was inevitable. The diplomatic vessel launched 3 hours later. It was a fast ship designed for long-distance travel, and it would reach Sol System in just under 20 rotations. That would give the humans 10 rotations to consider their response. 10 rotations to say goodbye to their freedom. 10 rotations to accept their place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. On the bridge of the diplomatic vessel, Captain Yenth of the Collective reviewed the mission parameters. She had delivered tribute demands to 7 different species over her career, and she knew exactly what to expect. There would be shock at first, then anger, then desperate attempts to negotiate. Finally, there would be acceptance. There was always acceptance. She pulled up the files on human psychology that Council Intelligence had compiled. They were an emotional species, prone to irrational behavior. They formed strong attachments to concepts like freedom and dignity. They had a troubling history of violence against their own kind. But none of that mattered. Many species had been violent before joining the Council. The tribute system had a way of beating the fight out of even the most aggressive cultures. Captain Yenth set her course and activated the hyperdrive. In 20 rotations, she would deliver the Council's demands. In 30 rotations, the humans would submit, and the galaxy would continue to turn exactly as it always had. But Captain Yenth did not know humans. None of them did. They had studied human biology and human technology and human history, but they had failed to understand the one thing that made humans truly dangerous. They had failed to understand that humans would rather burn than bend. The Council had conquered the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force. They had never encountered a species that simply refused to be afraid. They had never faced an enemy that would choose death over submission. They had never met humanity. They were about to learn a lesson that would shake the foundations of their 3,000-year empire. They were about to discover that some species cannot be broken. And that lesson would begin with a single word that no tribute species had ever dared to speak. That word was no. Admiral Helena Cross stood at the viewport of the UN Defiance and watched Earth turn slowly below. The planet looked so peaceful from up here, with its swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans. It was hard to believe that everything they had built was now under threat. She was 63 years old, with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion when she was young, and she still carried a scar on her left shoulder from a piece of shrapnel. She had dedicated her entire life to protecting humanity, and now she faced the greatest threat their species had ever known. The Council's diplomatic vessel had arrived 6 hours ago. Captain Yenth had delivered her message with cold efficiency, and then she had departed to wait at the edge of the solar system. The message itself was simple: submit or be destroyed. Pay tribute or face annihilation. Bend the knee or die. Admiral Cross turned away from the viewport and faced the men and women assembled in the conference room. These were the leaders of the United Earth Nations, the people who would decide humanity's fate. General Marcus Webb commanded the ground forces, a gruff man with a shaved head and arms like tree trunks. Secretary Chun oversaw diplomatic relations, a thin woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Director Amara Okonkwo ran the intelligence services, and she knew more secrets than anyone else in the room. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," General Webb growled. "These aliens want 60% of our minerals?" "That is correct," Secretary Chun replied. "And 40% of our food?" "Yes." "And 10,000 of our people every year to work as their slaves?" "They call them service workers, but yes. That is essentially what they are demanding." Webb slammed his fist on the table. "Then we fight. We build more ships, and we train more soldiers, and we show these council bastards what humans are made of." "With respect, General, that would be suicide," Director Okonkwo said quietly. She activated a holographic display that showed the military assets of every council species. The Hegemony Collective alone has over 10,000 warships. The Council's combined fleet numbers more than 50,000 vessels. We have 312 ships. The math is not in our favor. "So we just give up?" Webb demanded. "We hand over our resources and our people and hope they treat us nicely?" "I did not say that." Okonkwo pulled up another set of files, these ones marked with the highest security classification. "I have been studying the Council for 20 years. I know how their tribute system works. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that submission is not survival. It is slow extinction." She showed them images of the Valari homeworld. Once it had been a thriving planet with great cities and advanced technology. Now it was a polluted wasteland, stripped of resources and abandoned. The Valari themselves had been scattered across the galaxy, their population reduced from billions to mere hundreds of thousands. "The Crothians tried to fight," Okonkwo continued. "They were a warrior species with a proud military tradition. The Council crushed them in less than 2 weeks. Their leaders were executed, their culture was outlawed, and their children were taken to be raised as obedient servants. And the Mandari tried to negotiate," Secretary Chun added. "They thought they could find a middle ground, some compromise that would let them keep their dignity. 300 years later, they are still paying tribute. Their counselor sits in the Grand Chamber, but he has no real power. He is a puppet, nothing more." The room fell silent as the weight of the situation pressed down on them. There seemed to be no good options. Fight and die quickly. Submit and die slowly. Negotiate and end up as puppets. Every path led to the same dark destination. Admiral Cross walked to the head of the table and looked at each person in turn. "I have been a soldier for 40 years, she said. "I have fought in wars that seemed hopeless. I have lost friends and comrades and loved ones. And I have learned one thing that I know to be absolutely true." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was like iron. "There are some things worse than death. Slavery is worse than death. Watching your children grow up in chains is worse than death. Seeing your culture erased and your history forgotten is worse than death. And I will not condemn humanity to that fate." "Then what do you suggest?" Secretary Chun asked. "We cannot win a war, and we cannot accept their terms. One option is left." Admiral Cross smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. It was the expression of a woman who had already made peace with death and found it wanting. "We do something the Council has never seen before. We refuse. We look them in the eyes and we tell them no. And then we make them understand exactly what it will cost them to force the issue." "They will attack us," Webb pointed out. "You said it yourself. We cannot win." "We cannot win a conventional war," Cross agreed. "But wars are not won only on battlefields. Wars are won in the minds of your enemies. And right now, the Council believes they know what we will do. They expect us to be rational. They expect us to calculate the odds and choose survival over pride." She pulled up files on human history, wars, and conflicts dating back thousands of years. But humans are not rational. We never have been. When the Spartans faced the Persian Empire at Thermopylae, they knew they would die. They fought anyway. When the defenders of Stalingrad ran out of bullets, they fought with knives and rocks and bare hands. When our ancestors faced extinction during the Ice Ages, they did not give up. They adapted and survived and conquered every challenge this universe threw at them. What exactly are you proposing? Director Okonkwo asked. Admiral Cross turned to face her. I am proposing that we send the Council a message. A message that will make them question everything they think they know about us. A message that will show them the true face of humanity. She looked around the room one final time. I need our best historian, our best psychologist, and our best diplomat. We have 10 days to prepare our response. And when we are done, the galaxy will never look at humans the same way again. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, but one by one they nodded their agreement. They did not fully understand what Admiral Cross had planned, but they trusted her, and deep in their hearts they knew that she was right. Some fates were worse than death, and humanity would never accept them. Not today. Not ever. The Grand Chamber was filled to capacity when the human delegation arrived. Representatives from all 47 council species had gathered to witness humanity's surrender. Ambassador Xylith had taken a position near the front, eager to see the fear in the humans' eyes. High Arbiter Desha floated at the center of the chamber, her crystalline form pulsing with cold light. Captain Yenth had reported that the humans were sending their own ambassador to deliver their response in person. This was unusual, as most species simply transmitted their acceptance electronically. But Desha had allowed it. Let the humans have their moment of dignity before they bent the knee. The chamber doors opened, and a single human woman walked in. She was older, perhaps 60 by human standards, with silver hair and calm brown eyes. She wore a simple black uniform with no medals or decorations. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Vance, and she had been chosen for this mission because she understood both human history and alien psychology. She walked to the center of the chamber without hesitation, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Every eye in the room was fixed on her, but she showed no fear. She moved like someone who had already accepted whatever fate awaited her. The Council recognizes the representative of humanity, Desha intoned. You may deliver your species' response to our generous offer. Dear Vance smiled at the word generous. It was not a friendly smile. Thank you, High Arbiter. I have indeed come to deliver humanity's response. But first, with your permission, I would like to share some information about my species. I believe the Council may find it educational. Desha's light flickered with irritation, but she nodded. You may proceed. Vance activated a small device on her wrist, and the chamber's holographic systems came to life. Images began to appear in the air, images that would haunt the Council's dreams for years to come. This is called the Battle of Verdun, she began. It took place on Earth approximately 400 years ago. Two groups of humans fought over a small piece of land for almost an entire year. Over 700,000 humans died in that single battle. Not in the whole war, mind you, just in this one fight. For a few miles of mud and stone, the alien representative shifted uncomfortably. 700,000 dead for such a trivial gain. What kind of species would accept such losses? This is the Siege of Leningrad. The images changed to show a frozen city surrounded by enemy forces. For nearly 900 days, the people of this city were trapped without food or supplies. They ate rats and leather and the bark from trees. Over 1 million civilians died of starvation and cold. But they never surrendered. They held that city until the very end. Xylith's scales had begun to pale. He had studied human history, but seeing it presented like this was something else entirely. These creatures were insane. This is Hiroshima. A massive explosion filled the display, a mushroom cloud rising into the sky. Humans developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single instant. And then we used them. Not on aliens, mind you. We used them on each other. We were willing to vaporize hundreds of thousands of our own kind to end a war. Murmurs of horror rippled through the chamber. What species would develop such weapons? What species would actually use them? This is the Mars Rebellion. The images shifted to show space battles and desperate colonists fighting in pressure suits. Our own people fought against their government for 3 years. They ran out of food and air and ammunition. They knew they could not win. But they kept fighting anyway, because they believed their cause was worth dying for. Dervance paused and looked around the chamber. She could see the fear beginning to creep into the aliens' eyes. Good. Fear was exactly what she wanted them to feel. You see, the Council has made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You looked at our technology and our military strength, and you concluded that we were weak. But you failed to understand the most important thing about humans. She stepped forward, and her voice rang through the chamber like a bell. We are not rational. We do not calculate odds and choose the logical path. When we are cornered, when we are threatened, when everything we love is at stake, we do not think about survival. We think about revenge. She pulled up one final set of images. Battle plans and military strategies, and something called the Scorched Earth Protocol. These are our contingency plans. If the Council attacks us, we will fight. We will lose, of course. Your fleets are too large, and your technology is too advanced. But we will make you pay for every ship, every soldier, every inch of space. We will ram your vessels with our own. We will detonate nuclear weapons inside your formations. We will turn every colony into a death trap and every city into a fortress. Her voice dropped to a cold whisper. And if you somehow manage to conquer all our worlds, it will not matter, because we will have already destroyed everything of value. Our cities will be ashes. Our resources will be poisoned. Our people will have instructions to resist and sabotage and terrorize for as long as they live. You will inherit nothing but ghosts and ruins. The chamber was utterly silent. No species had ever spoken to the Council like this. No species had ever dared. Furthermore, Dr. Vance continued, we will broadcast everything. Every battle, every atrocity, every act of resistance. We will show the entire galaxy what happens when a species refuses to submit. We will become martyrs and legends. And every tribute species will watch and wonder if maybe, just maybe, they could do the same. She looked directly at High Arbiter Desha. So here is humanity's response to your generous offer. No, we will not pay your tribute. We will not give you our resources. We will not sell our children into slavery. The answer is no, and it will always be no. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. You can destroy us if you choose, but you will never break us. And 1,000 years from now, when other species rise up against your tyranny, they will remember the humans who looked the mighty Council in the eye and said no. Dr. Vance transmitted one final file to every system in the chamber. It contained everything: the military plans, the resistance strategies, the proof of humanity's commitment to their own destruction rather than submission. The choice is yours, High Arbiter. Leave us in peace, and you will find no more loyal ally in the galaxy. Try to force us to our knees, and you will learn why humans have a saying: it is better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. She turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps the only sound in the deathly silent chamber. At the threshold, she paused and looked back one final time. We await your decision. But do not mistake our patience for weakness. We have already accepted that we might die. The only question that remains is how many of you we will take with us. And then she was gone, leaving the council to contemplate what they had just witnessed. For the first time in 3,000 years, a species had refused to kneel, and the galaxy would never be the same. The grand chamber erupted into chaos the moment Dr. Vance left the room. Ambassadors shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Some demanded immediate military action while others called for calm. High Arbiter Desha tried to restore order, but even her ancient authority seemed diminished in the wake of humanity's defiance. Ambassador Xyleth pushed his way to the speaking platform, his scales flushed dark with rage. "This is outrageous," he bellowed. "No species has ever dared to speak to the Council in such a manner. We must crush them immediately. We must make an example that will echo through the ages." "And how many ships are you willing to lose?" asked Councillor Preth quietly. The Mandari representative had been silent throughout Dr. Vance's presentation, but now he spoke with a weight that made others listen. "You saw their contingency plans. They are prepared to destroy themselves rather than submit. How many of our soldiers will die taking those poisoned worlds?" "It does not matter," Xyleth snarled. "If we let this defiance stand, every tribute species will think they can do the same. We must act decisively." "Must we?" Preth stood slowly, his aged body trembling but his voice strong. "I have served on this council for 200 years. I have watched species after species bow before your demands. I have seen proud cultures reduced to servitude and ancient peoples driven to extinction. And I have always told myself it was necessary. I told myself it was the only way to maintain order." He looked around the chamber at the other tribute representatives. They were watching him with expressions of barely concealed hope. "But now I wonder if we were simply too afraid to do what these humans have done. I wonder if we gave up too easily." "You forget yourself, Counselor." Desha's voice crackled with warning. "The Mandari exist because the Council permits it. Do not test our patience." "Your patience?" Preth laughed bitterly. "We have endured 3 centuries of patience. 3 centuries of watching our children taken for your labor camps. 3 centuries of having our resources stripped away. Perhaps it is time for you to endure some of ours." The chamber fell silent. No tribute representative had ever spoken like this. The very foundations of the Council's authority seemed to tremble. But Preth's outburst was only the beginning. In the hours that followed, something remarkable began to happen. Humanity's message had been broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy. Durance had made sure of that. And now, on 1,000 worlds, beings who had long ago accepted their fate began to reconsider. On Velar Prime, where the once great Velari civilization had been reduced to scattered survivors, young people gathered in secret to watch the recording of humanity's defiance. They had grown up being told that resistance was impossible, that submission was the only option. But here were these strange 2-legged creatures saying no. Here was proof that another way existed. On Crothia, where the Council had forbidden the teaching of traditional warrior culture, old veterans dusted off hidden weapons and began to sing the battle songs of their ancestors. The songs had been passed down in whispers for generations, and now they rose in volume. Guards who came to investigate found only innocent faces and silent rooms, but everyone knew something had changed. On mining colonies and agricultural stations throughout Council space, workers began to slow their production. Nothing obvious, nothing that could be punished. Just a slight decrease in efficiency, a few more sick days taken, a few more tools that mysteriously broke. It was not rebellion, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. The Council's intelligence services were overwhelmed with reports. Unauthorized gatherings on 12 different worlds. Tribute shipments arriving incomplete from 17 systems. Protests and work stoppages in places that have been peaceful for centuries. The humans had done something that no amount of military force could undo. They had given the galaxy hope. High Arbiter Desha called an emergency session. Only the full council members were permitted to attend, not the tribute representatives. But even among these powerful beings, there was no consensus. "We must attack immediately," insisted Ambassador Xyleth. "Every day we wait makes us look weaker. The tribute species will think they can defy us too. And if we attack and lose 10,000 ships taking their worthless burned worlds," countered Ambassador Thesix of the Varai, "how will it make us look? We will have proven that resistance, even futile resistance, carries a terrible price. Other species will take note. Then, what do you suggest? That we simply accept their refusal?" "I suggest," Desha interrupted, "that we consider our options carefully. The humans have put us in a difficult position. If we attack, we create martyrs. If we do nothing, we look weak. There must be another path." The debate continued for 3 days. Factions formed and dissolved and reformed. Warhawks demanded blood while moderates urged caution. Meanwhile, the situation across the galaxy continued to deteriorate. A transport ship carrying tribute workers from the Mendari homeworld arrived at its destination half empty. The workers had simply refused to board. When the council demanded answers, the Mendari government claimed they could not find the missing people. Everyone knew it was a lie, but proving it would require a military occupation. 3 Velari servants in the household of a wealthy council member disappeared in the night. They left behind a note with a single word: "No." A mining station in Crothian space reported that its equipment had suffered catastrophic failures. All the heavy machinery had been sabotaged beyond repair. The investigation found no evidence of who was responsible, though the Crothian workers had all been smiling when questioned. This is exactly what the humans wanted. Xyleth raged. "They have infected the galaxy with their madness. Every day we delay, more species will join their cause. And every day we attack, we prove that their way works," Desha replied wearily. "We are trapped, Ambassador. The humans have given us only bad choices." She turned to address the full assembly. "I have studied the situation from every angle. Military action will cost us dearly and accomplish nothing. The humans will die, but their message will live on. We will spend the next 1,000 years fighting rebellions and uprisings." "Then what do you propose?" asked Vesix. Desha's crystalline form dimmed, which was the equivalent of a heavy sigh among her species. "I propose something that this council has never done in 3,000 years of existence." Everyone leaned forward. "I propose that we negotiate, not from a position of dominance, but from a position of equals. I propose that we find a way to bring humanity into our community as partners rather than subjects." "That is unprecedented," Xyleth protested. "So is there defiance?" Desha countered. "These humans have shown us something we had forgotten. Some species cannot be broken. Some fires cannot be extinguished. We can either adapt to this reality, or we can watch our empire crumble around us." She looked at each council member in turn. "The choice is ours. We can be remembered as the council that fought a pointless war and lost everything. Or we can be remembered as the council that was wise enough to recognize a new kind of strength and embrace it." The vote was close, but in the end wisdom prevailed over pride. For the first time in 3,000 years, the council would negotiate as equals. And across the galaxy, the oppressed looked up at the stars and dared to dream. 6 months had passed since Dr. Eleanor Vance walked out of the Grand Chamber. 6 months of tense negotiations and careful diplomacy. 6 months of a galaxy holding its breath, waiting to see if humanity's gamble would pay off. Today, Dr. Vance returned to the Grand Chamber. But this time, everything was different. She did not walk alone. Behind her came Admiral Helena Cross in her dress uniform, Secretary Chun in her diplomatic robes, and a dozen other human representatives. They walked with their heads held high, and the aliens who watched them enter no longer looked down with contempt. They looked with something closer to respect. High Arbiter Desha waited at the center of the chamber. She too had changed in the past 6 months. Her crystalline form seemed somehow softer, less harsh. The cold arrogance that had defined her for millennia had given way to something that might have been wisdom. "The Council recognizes the delegation from the United Earth Nations," she announced. "We have gathered today to formalize the Treaty of Soul and to welcome humanity into the galactic community." A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. This was truly unprecedented. Never before had a species entered the Council as anything other than a tribute payer. But humanity had forced them to create something new. Dr. Vance stepped forward to speak. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and delivered a message that many called insane. I told you that humanity would rather die than submit. I told you that we would burn our own worlds before we would see them enslaved. Many of you thought I was bluffing. She smiled, and this time the smile was warm. But you have come to understand that we meant every word. And more importantly, you have come to understand why. Humans do not value life above all else. We value freedom and dignity and the right to determine our own fate. We would rather live one day as free people than 1,000 years as slaves. Desha nodded slowly. We have learned much about your species in these past months. Your history is filled with violence and suffering, but also with courage and determination. You are unlike any species we have encountered before, and that is why we are here today. Dr. Vance held up a data crystal that contained the final text of the treaty. This document establishes humanity as a sovereign partner species of the Galactic Council. We will pay no tribute. We will provide no forced labor. Our resources remain our own, and our people are free. The chamber was silent as she continued. In return, humanity agrees to trade fairly with all Council species. We will contribute to the common defense of civilized space. We will share our technology and our knowledge. And we will stand as allies to any who treat us with respect. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from dozens of different worlds. But this treaty contains something even more important. It establishes a new principle that we call the Vance Doctrine. Any species that can demonstrate unified resistance to Council demands, any species that can prove they would rather face destruction than submission, may petition for sovereign partner status. Gasps echoed through the chamber. This was revolutionary. This would change everything. The old way is over, Dr. Vance declared. No longer will the Council rule through fear and domination. From this day forward, respect must be earned, not demanded. Freedom must be recognized, not granted. And every species in this galaxy will have the chance to stand as equals. High Arbiter Desha floated forward to add her seal to the treaty. The Council accepts these terms. May this be the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual respect. The chamber erupted in applause, but it was not the polite applause of diplomats. It was something raw and genuine and full of hope. The tribute representatives cheered loudest of all, for they knew that their own freedom might now be possible. 1 year later, the Valari submitted their petition for sovereign partner status. Their population was small and their resources were limited, but they had organized a unified resistance movement that was prepared to die for their freedom. The Council approved their petition after only 3 days of deliberation. 2 months after that, the Crothians followed. Their petition was accompanied by a demonstration of their traditional warrior culture, which had survived 3 centuries of suppression. Old soldiers who had hidden their weapons now stood proudly in the grand chamber, singing the battle songs of their ancestors. The Mandari were next. Councillor Preth, who had spoken up during the crisis, became a hero to his people. He led the delegation that presented their petition, and tears ran down his aged face when sovereignty was granted. He died 3 months later, but he died knowing that his children would grow up free. By the end of the second year, 17 species had achieved sovereign partner status. The old tribute system did not collapse overnight, but it began to transform. Some species still chose to pay tribute in exchange for protection, but now it was a choice. They could leave whenever they wanted. And that made all the difference. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the UN Unconquered, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Through the viewport, she could see the lights of 100 different vessels, ships from a dozen different species, all traveling together. They were heading to the galactic core for the first joint military exercises in history. Beside her stood Ambassador Xyleth. He had requested assignment as a liaison officer to the human fleet, a posting that many considered beneath his dignity. But Xyleth had his reasons. "I still do not fully understand your species," he admitted as he watched the stars stream past. "You were outnumbered and outgunned. Every rational calculation said you should have submitted. Why did you choose to risk everything?" Admiral Cross turned to face him. Her silver hair had grown a bit longer, and there were new lines around her eyes. But she still stood straight and proud, the same woman who had decided to bet humanity's future on a single act of defiance. "Because some things matter more than survival," she said simply. "Freedom matters. Dignity matters. The right to live your own life and make your own choices matters. We knew we might die, but we also knew that a life without freedom was not really living." Xyleth's scales rippled with an emotion that humans had learned to recognize as thoughtfulness. "Before I met your kind, I believed that strength came from power, from ships and weapons and resources. But you have taught me that true strength comes from somewhere else." "From where?" Cross asked. "From here." Xyleth touched his chest where his heart would be. "From the willingness to sacrifice everything for what you believe. From the courage to say no when everyone else says yes. Your species has a fire inside that cannot be extinguished. And that fire has spread across the galaxy." Admiral Cross smiled and looked out at the fleet of ships surrounding them. Valari cruisers flew alongside Crothian destroyers. Mandari transports kept pace with human carriers. A dozen species that had once been enemies were now allies, united by the example of one small blue world that had refused to kneel. "We have a saying back on Earth," she said. "We do not inherit freedom from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Every generation must be willing to fight for it, or it will be lost." She turned to face Xyleth fully. "You asked why we risked everything. The answer is simple. We did it for them, for the humans who will come after us, for the Valari children who will grow up free, for the Crothian warriors who can finally honor their heritage, for every being in this galaxy who will never have to kneel before a tyrant." The Unconquered jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward a future that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. Behind them, Earth continued its slow dance around the sun, a tiny blue jewel that had changed the course of galactic history. And across the stars, on 1,000 different worlds, beings looked up at the night sky and spoke a word that had once been forbidden. That word was hope. For humanity had shown them that even the mightiest empires could be challenged. Even the darkest nights would eventually end. And even the smallest voice, raised in defiance, could echo through the ages. The Council had demanded tribute. Humanity had given them something far more valuable. They had given them freedom. And the galaxy would never be the same.